welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michele. And so this week we landed on the power of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably thinking, yeah, right, what can be? And the reality of it is RokoM and I started to talk about this to figure out quotes and stories and our perspective on it. I think it's foundational. So failure is foundational to success because that's where your learning happens, right? So I'm going to start off with a quote because there were a number of them, as RokoM and I tend to find. And this one is, most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. And I think about, what was it, Thomas Edison? He didn't fail 10,000 times. He found 10,000 ways that it didn't work. I think a lot of it is mindset and perspective on that. And what are you going to unpack and learn from it to move on?
Yeah. Well, when you first brought up the topic, the first thing that came to mind was that scientific thinking, going back to, process improvement and, but it is having that scientific mindset that nobody has a crystal ball. Everything is just learning. It's hypothesis. It's testing out what you do and do not know about something. And no matter what happens, you're going to learn from it. And so failure is part of succeeding or part of the learning process that we go through.
So there's a couple of things that came to mind when you said that. And one of them is along the lines of fail faster, right? And I've heard that from lean methodologies and all that stuff. And it's about get to experiments, right? So you can learn and see what's going on. The other thing that came in my head is we're not talking about killing people. We're talking about taking calculated risk or experiments that, you're not sacrificing. Here's the other piece so my brain just went, right? The other piece in that is that leaders need to create the space so people can fail and learn from it. Because if you don't have that safe space, people call psychological safety, whatever it is, but if you're going to get beat up from making a mistake or there's a failure in something you've done, how likely are you to step in and try something new?
Right. Yeah. And it like you said, it's foundational. It's fundamental to creating a learning environment. And we're taught very early on in school, there is a right answer and a wrong answer. And don't raise your hand unless you know that right answer. Otherwise you might get embarrassed by the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think in traditional style of management, there are some cultures within business that feed that same culture of, if you don't have the right answer, don't speak up. But if organizations are going to remain nimble and competitive and facile so that they can address this very fast, ever-changing world of ours, and that pace of change is happening at a much greater rate than in the past, then we have to start building the capabilities of our leaders, but also our frontline staff, how to manage it, how to accept failure as part of success, as part of our ability to stay competitive.
What's your definition of failure?
So
before, just a quick, someone asked you, as I just did.
As you just did.
What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, it's just about learning. Failure is just about learning what you don't know and what you do know about something. So I'm going back to, I feel like I have deja vu because we always bring this up, but
dreamt about it.
In problem solving, we ask ourselves, what do we actually know? How do we know it? What do we need to know? And how might we learn it? Those are the 4 questioning mind questions. And we've brought them up several times in all,
Thank you, David Verbal.
Thank you, David Verbal. But again, by doing that, you are learning about something. And to fail at something is just testing your knowledge about that thing that you were looking at.
So there's your definition.
That's my definition.
Which I agree with, right? It's just part of success, right? And there was a failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of success. It's one of the other quotes that we looked at. But I will say one of the barriers to having power and failure is the definition that people are giving it. because it doesn't mean that you don't have capabilities. It doesn't mean that you're not able to improve, right? And I look at my grandkids where, you know, Reese is just all out. He's a 2-year-old, right? And so he's on his little scooter, he's going crazy. He may fall, and we may consider that a failure, but he's going to get back up again and he's going to do it again because no one's sitting there laughing at him, right? Or chastising him. So I think what's going to be super important, Roko, in order for there to be power in failure, is to redefine it to what you're talking about and to remove judgment from the word.
Yeah. Right. Judgment. And I would say that it's not permanent.
Right.
So part of it is perspective, right? So with a scientific mindset, failure is not permanent. Yeah, your experiment might not have rendered the result that you anticipated, but that's not permanent. You have the capability of testing something else. Go back to the drawing board. Go back to think of other possibilities or what else you can do if that thing didn't work. So it's not permanent. So it's creating this idea in your mind that, yeah, we failed, but let's try something else.
Yeah. And so
now no, that doesn't work with all of these conditions. We might have to do something else.
When you say we failed, right, go try something else, is that this thing didn't work or we haven't figured out what it is yet.
Right.
Right. So there's this opportunity of hope and inspiration that, you know, there's more beyond this moment in time. What did we learn? And you're talking about the PDSA cycle, right? And so what you said earlier, it's like, so what adjustment are we going to make?
Yeah.
And then the plan is to go again. And I think it's only failure. And I think some of the quotes said this too. If you stop trying.
Right.
And that's when it becomes permanent, right? Is that if I stop and this is all she wrote, then all of a sudden there's no power in it anymore to learn and grow. There's the power to just stop you in your tracks.
Right.
So I think the choice of the power of failure being something that motivates you and drives you forward to learn more and make adjustments, and the power of failure to stop you and build a wall to where you don't go any further is 100% up to you and the choice that you make.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so again, pulling us back to, you know, what we want leaders to take away with is if you're a leader and you're looking at your, you know, style of leadership or how your team functions, and it, you know, if it's not the desired culture or results that you want, reflect back on, you know, have I created this space where failure is okay, as long as we're learning from it and we're moving on and we don't get stuck in it, right? So what can you do to start shifting that? How can you scope? How can you have different conversations with your team in advance of solving some problem, or as a circumstance happens, how do you respond to it? So that if there was a failure, something didn't work as intended, you're not chastising or shutting people down. You're you know, acknowledging, hey, okay, so what were the conditions that you didn't anticipate that created the failure? Or what else could we do differently based on the conditions that we now know about the circumstance? This
reminds me, it just clicked. Because you and I were talking about this, feels so familiar that we've talked about this. There was the story that it was Spanx. That her dad had set that expectation for her.
Yeah.
And her brother of, you know, every week at the dinner table, he'd go, what did you fail at this week? And I think if you spin it that way, okay, because in that failure means you're trying stuff that you haven't succeeded at before.
Yeah.
There's new stuff happening. You're taking risk. You're pushing the boundaries. You're innovating, right? And that's
growing. You're growing.
Yes. That's the power in that failure.
Yeah.
Is that you're actually going and trying something new and learning from it. And so I 100% agree with you, but that's where my brain went. Just I'm like, okay, we have talked about, but only in that example of that.
I knew it was a deja vu for some reason.
It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a dream. It was not a topic. It was a woven in thing. So,
Yeah.
so Roko, what do you, and I know you talked about aspects of leaders and stuff like that. What's one thing on this topic that you want people to walk away with?
I think failure is a part of learning and growing, and it's a leader's responsibility to allow in a safe way for their teams to fail, to be okay with failure, and learn from it.
What came to mind for me, it was along the lines of the whole Spanx thing, is it would be stinking cool, okay, if leaders could set that expectation. Like you have, I remember when I was in finance and Brett Moore was our director of the finance team, and he was ahead of his time, okay, and he had us saying, you know, the teams need to do so many improvement goals, you know, throughout the year. And this is before we talked about lean or process improvement or anything else. But if you had a goal that there had to be so many failures, right, which meant people were taking risks, they were doing things differently. I mean, I think that would be pretty stinking cool for a leader to go, you know what? And I'm not talking about errors and whatever, but I mean, just take risk. So if you had, what did you fail at, or that was part of the discussion, I think it'd be really cool spin. So you can figure out, what are you improving? What are you doing better at?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway.
It's taking that fear away from failure. I think, okay, so I modify what I want them to take. Taking the fear out of failure. Taking the fear out of failure. That's what I want to walk away with.
Yeah, take the fear out of failure and remove judgment from it.
Yes.
So redefine what failure means to you.
Yes.
It's a gift and an opportunity.
That's right.
All right. So thank you. This has been Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michele. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have a topic you want to hear about, or you want to just become a guest, come talk to us. We'd love to unpack something with you. Until next time, thank you.
All right.